About a year ago, I made a video looking at the soundtrack to Minecraft, and how the minimalist techniques used by composer C418 enabled the music to fit within the game's world. Now, one of the comments on the video at that time asked if I could do the same thing with the then upcoming 1.16 update, which included some new soundtrack from composer Lena Raine. Well, it's been almost a year and I've finally gotten around to it, so let's hope that Remirath42 is still around to see it. The 1.16 soundtrack was composed by Lena Raine, who you might know from her work on other video games like Celeste. It's also worth noting that this music was written specifically for the Nether region. No, wait, that sounds bad. I mean the Nether dimension, so you'll never hear it in the same context as C418's original pieces. With that said, it seems a little unfair to compare them side by side, so I'll talk about the differences between the two and how they fit into their respective places, and try to explain the music theory in an easy to understand way. With the exception of Pigstep, which is a music disc, the new tracks follow the minimalist aesthetic of the rest of the soundtrack, but that's about where the similarities end. In the last video, I compared some of the differences in the soundtrack to the differences between minimalist composer Philip Glass and ambient composer Brian Eno. Where C418's tracks seem to straddle that spectrum, Raine's music definitely moves in the more ambient direction, including lots of reverb-soaked synth pads and gradually swelling harmonic textures. Let's start with Rubido, which Raine self-describes as the simplest of the pieces. And, fun fact, the name of the track actually comes from the Latin word for redness. It's over 5 minutes long, which in itself is a huge contrast to most of C418's shorter tracks. It begins with an arpeggiated motif of 2/5 layered on top of one another, an E5 or E to B, and a D5 or D to A on top of that. Although fifths are a very stable musical interval, because D and E only have one black note between them on the keyboard, layering them on top of each other creates a very eerie feeling. Raine further explores this by diminishing the top note a half step at a time, first to A flat and then to G. This descending theme forms the basis for the entire track, perpetuating the uneasy feeling, a prime reason why it fits so well into the dark hellscape of the Nether. Motifs like this are a great building block for atmosphere and a stylistic feature often used by Lena Raine. Tracks like Golden from the Celeste OST use the same technique, which you can hear here. By contrast, let's listen to Equinox from Volume Alpha. This track probably contains the most similarity to Rubido, with both building to epic harmonic climaxes before quickly decaying. Equinox, however, contains much brighter and more cheerful instrumentation, bright fuzzy synthesizers and percussive plucks accompanying the piano. Rubido's instrumentation towards the climax consists of more dark, ethereal and sci-fi synthesizers, building tension in a dark and foreboding way, similar to Hans Zimmer's soundtrack from Interstellar. Both tracks are perfect in their setting, which can easily be proved by seeing how out of place they would sound if you swapped them around within the game. In all seriousness, I don't really think I can make this video without talking about Pigstep. Minecraft's music discs differ from the main soundtrack in that they sort of ignore all the ongoing minimalist and ambient themes and incorporate vastly different instrumentation, as well as a lot of musical development. My personal favourite is Ward. It actually starts off with a sample from Chopin's Funeral March, but then somehow manages to combine record crackles and chip-tuned synths into this catchy and very danceable beat. The drum tracks are something you seldom see in the naturally occurring soundtrack either. But where these discs really differentiate is their musical sections, which are defined by theme or instrumental changes, instead of all just melding into one ambient blob. Pigstep definitely follows this idea, starting with an irresistibly catchy bass riff which is supplemented after the drop by a very blues or jazzy feeling melody, and samples of bacon sizzling, which is a great way to show that the track isn't taking itself too seriously while also fitting the theme in a very self-aware way. The music discs in Minecraft are quite a cool variation from the rest of the soundtrack, so if you'd like to see another video of me looking at these in more depth, let me know. Back to the Nether music, that still sounds really bad, who came up with that name? Anyway, overall I think the soundtrack is a great addition to the game. Listening to me talk about it is one thing, but I definitely encourage you to go and play for yourself and hear how the music integrates with the world if you want to get the full experience. Yes, it's a big deviation from the original Minecraft soundtrack, but I think that's a good thing. Coming in as a second composer to a game with music as famous as Minecraft, you're never going to be able to compete with Volume Alpha. So instead of living in its shadow, I think branching out and making something different was definitely the right move by Lena Raine. The music still fits into the soundtrack, both in terms of sound and of context, and I think it's a very fitting addition. As always, if you know any other games that you think have amazing soundtracks and you'd like me to take a look at them, let me know, I'd love to hear about it. Anyway, that's all from me, so thanks for watching.